Right. Well, and I'm Mike, the executive director of the chamber, for Elvia's edification, and then of course anybody who's watching this later, whether on Friday or another time. And I've said this before to chamber members, but it always bears repeating because I'll say it to anybody who will listen. I was fortunate enough to work with Avant Consulting for a couple years when I was at Cradle Cincinnati doing policy and partnership management around social determinants, and I can't overstate enough the impact the work I did with them regarding implicit bias had on my decision-making process, the way I go about making decisions, the way I gather information. I could go on, and I've taken a lot of those lessons, all of those lessons, rather, into this role at the Human Services Chamber. Being a privileged white male doing the work that I've elected to do the past 20 years, it's important for me, and Dr. Avant and Bryce helped me realize just how important it was for me to be aware of my biases. I still do this work, and I'm still well aware that I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I definitely would not be where I am if it wasn't for these two. So I'll stop because this isn't about everything I learned from Bryce and Nicole. But I'll turn it over to you all, and again, just reiterate how appreciative I am, and for folks watching this in the chamber, I can vouch for the efficacy of their work. So I'll turn it over to y'all.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate that. And Mike and Elvia, we will definitely be engaging with you all during this session. So bear with us as we do that. But who we are a collective of academics, experiential experts, health professionals. I'm also a board certified pharmacist, sociologist, adventure therapist, burnout recovery coaches, anthropologists, social workers, and we help organizations with their diversity, equity, and inclusion needs. Some of our clients are interested in engaging in anti-oppressive work. And so we help them identify what would that look like? What does that mean? How do we set a vision for that? And what strategies do we need to implement? And what structures do we need to implement to make that dream a reality? And you already met some of the people that work with us, but I'm very, very happy and very, very blessed to have so many people who are willing to share their time, their talents, and their brilliance with us. You've already met Faith, Ashley, and Bryce. But we have Dr. Bates and Stephanie and Dr. Green and Dr. Hardy and Dr. Harley and Dr. McGee and Dr. Rodriguez, and they really support the work that we're doing, depending on what project we are engaging with.
Workplace for me is kind of a strange word because I'm the employee, the Human Services Chamber. I mean, and Hannah, who lives in Indiana, obviously helps coordinate all of this. So she's part-time, works from home. So in Cincinnati, the Human Services Chamber employee is me. So when I hear that question, the way I think about things now, my workplace is sort of what is the social benefit sector writ large in Hamilton County, which is an intimidating thing in a lot of ways to think about. But what I keep coming up with, and when you ask that question, the first thing that I thought of was there are two things, I guess. One, and I recognize, the irony is not the right word, but I recognize in saying this how odd it may sound, but the fact that while we have a workforce that not, maybe predominantly, but largely is Black, Hispanic, made up of all different races, immigrants, refugees, the people that are making the decisions are often look like me. More so than that, though, one thing that I keep coming up against, I feel like people are having this conversation, to Elvia's point, a lot more readily and a lot more openly regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And while I think those words are themselves are beginning to be understood perhaps a little better by my fellow white folks, I'm not speaking on behalf of all white people, but the one thing that I feel is a really hard lift for a lot of people in my position, that being a white person in a decision-making role, is understanding what racism actually is. And that racism isn't being mean to Black people. That's bad, and we don't want to do it. And I learned a lot of this, of course, from Dr. Meredith Shockley-Smith, Dr. Avant, Bryce, and others when I was at Cradle. But when we start talking about dismantling racism in our various nonprofit systems, that conversation is a lot harder, I feel, for people like me than diversity, equity, and inclusion, if that makes sense.
I appreciate that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was very, very helpful. Thanks, Elvia. Thanks, Mike. And so you all are seeing some of the things that we're seeing. A lot of organizations are, they want to be more diverse. They want to be more equitable and inclusive. But I don't know if maybe even DE&I has lost its meaning. I don't know if it's just something that people are like, okay, I know that this is something that we're supposed to do and we should
Yep.
engage in this, but then they don't even know where to start. They don't even understand, or maybe they do know where to start, but they have a lot of fears regarding where to start. Faith?
Yeah, I think part of what I've noticed is that the underpinnings of society is what we're dealing with, but it's so invisible, right? So, we often, I love the fish, lake, groundwater analogy, or the upstream, downstream, analogies, that what we're looking at when we see, conflict, when we see people being uncomfortable at work in some way, when we see 63 cents to the dollar for a Black woman versus a white man in the workplace. When we see those things, what we have to understand is that although it can be justified on the surface through whatever mechanisms we choose, all the way down, the systems that we have been built on commoditizing human labor. And so racism and all systems of supremacist thinking that basically create hierarchies of human value need to be understood so that we can be actively dismantling them in our micro behaviors day to day. So what does that look like? It looks like, instead of, yes, we should be addressing conflict, which we see a lot, and conflict that shows up with this question: is it because I'm Black? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm queer? What is the issue? The question that shows up in people's mind, that's a conflict. But what's really happening is that we need to build systems of psychological safety, and we need to build systems where there's trust, and we need to build systems that help people understand the tendencies towards retaliation and then be able to dismantle that. And so we've kind of been seeing this dichotomy of underlying issues that must be healed. And that's why we do some of the work that we do. Nicole.
Yeah, thank you, Faith. Appreciate that. And some of the clients we have served include health systems, medical partners, academic institutions, nonprofits, if I haven't said that yet. And we've started to work with a little bit of for-profits, not a lot, but most of our work has been really centered around health systems. And I would say the either health system adjacent or the social services sector. But the work that we're doing is the work that we can do across any institution. It's just that I'm a pharmacist. And so that's where I got my start. My very, very, very first client or major client was UC Health.
Yeah.
And so oh, please, Bryce.
Oh, the only thing I would add is something I'm sure other folks have heard me say, but regardless of your institution or the employees we're working with, I firmly believe that our work makes better employees. So if you are a nurse and you can engage in these conversations, you will be a better nurse. If you're an executive director and you have experience with these conversations, you will be a better executive director, will be more effective. And so I just want to add that bonus in there, that regardless of the institution you're with, we will make more effective, better engaged employees through our work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thank you for the pause too. We're working with the organization now, and they have named that they want to be an anti-racist organization, that they want to be anti-oppressive. And so part of that work is just really trying to envision, what does that look like? When you say you want to be an anti-racist organization, what does that look like for you? We're also, have created or drafting some community agreements that they can use. Like, okay, when you step in and when you say something that's inappropriate, when you say something that is violent or harmful, how do we repair that harm? How do we cultivate trust in the workplace? And so those are one of the things that we're working with this client to do. We're also coaching their supervisors to really engage this process, because it is difficult, it is hard. We're doing something that probably not a lot of organizations are doing. And so we understand that work can be, is definitely revolutionary. But it's not just challenging organizationally, but it challenges employees individually. And so we're kind of working with and coaching the supervisor so that we can make these changes that we want to see. Anything you want to add, Faith or Bryce? Okay. And so we also work with individuals to help them. You know, a lot of our work is B2B, but we know that sometimes people seek us out because they're like, listen, I don't know that I can get my organizations to pay for this kind of work, but I would love to work with you one-on-one. And so some of the types of services that we have offered in the past, we do listening sessions, even to create those community agreements. One of the things we did was hold space for the employees, multiple sessions. And I think I asked something like, what do you need to feel safe to fully participate at work among your employees, your supervisors, and so forth. And it was such an amazing experience. I really loved being in that space where people can talk about like, this is what I need to feel safe at work. And then we did a thematic analysis and provided a report to our client. We also, like I mentioned, we do one-on-one and group coaching to help the process along, whatever the goals might be for organizational development, for, improving emotional regulation or enhancing trust and accountability. We want to support, we want to help. And we also do some consulting and advising. And so we meet with senior leadership or whatever team is involved with this process or this transformation. And like Faith said earlier, we help with conflict navigation. So that looks like for us unearthing conflicts. When I mess up and when I step in it, I hope that I'm extended grace. And so we cultivate grace in the workplace and any characteristics that are needed to repair harm that has been caused. And sometimes we want to also be a little bit more handle conflict prospectively. And so we will, develop community agreements. That's something that we've done in the past. But also like having a team of people that you can go to when conflict is happening or you feel like it's forming, that is very helpful too. And then obviously we offer a lot of education and training. I think Mike spoke to that a few times. A lot of people come to us for our implicit bias training and our trainings related to interpersonal power dynamics. I know that, I hold both power and marginalized identities. And maybe it's easy for me to talk about how I've been harmed, but I think it's just as important for me to talk about, or maybe even more, how I've harmed other people. And so a lot of our work is just really getting people to see that we're kind of all in this together. Some of us are benefiting from certain systems more than others, but it's important. If we want to dismantle these systems, we have to understand our participation and our role in upholding these systems. And so, and we talk about what these systems are, what they look like. And I think that is probably one of the things that's probably how we got our start, was definitely through education and training, because we educate and train from a place of empathy, not from a place of shame and blame. It's not a lecture. It's more of a space where I'm like, I am identifying where I've gotten it wrong. Bryce is identifying where he's gotten it wrong. Faith is sharing how she's gotten it wrong. And so it's not like we're elitist and we're up here and like, how dare you? It's more like we are all in this together. Please learn from the mistakes that we have made. And so before we close out, I would love to know what's one additional skill you wish your employees had. And I know for you, Mike, you don't have really any other employees outside of Hannah, but just in general, like what is something that you wish as it relates to building more just and equitable and safe work environments? What's a skill you wish your employees had?
I could say, again, thinking in that broader kind of sense, and also thinking with some of the other hats I wear. I know you all know I wear a couple other hats, and I work in other circles and play in other sandboxes. And again, I come back to the same thing, Nicole. Like, I think y'all summed it up pretty good. Like, has DEI gotten watered down? Has it become something that we just say and check a box? I don't fancy myself a cynical guy. Maybe I am, but that's kind of what I was alluding to when I said I think those conversations are easier to have, but are they easier because we're ready to have them? Or are they easier because white folks know that we can just say it and then move on from it? Again, not to speak on behalf of white folks, but so I come back to the racism bit. Like, my thinking of the hat I wear now, and working with city council on behalf of my 100 members in the chamber, working with the county commission on behalf of the members, and then some of my other roles. If people had a better understanding of what racism is. And really everything Faith said, I wish you could have seen me, Faith, when you were talking about our micro actions and dismantling the commodification of labor and all this. Like, I know what you meant when you said that. And I know people will be watching this and won't necessarily understand that. And that's okay. And I'm saying that to those people. That's okay that you didn't understand that, because Faith dropped a lot of stuff on you in about 30 seconds. But if there were rooms I could walk into where everybody would understand what that 30-second speech Faith made meant, it would make the goals of the chamber and what we're trying to do much, much easier. And I realize I can say that after 2 years with Bryce and Dr. Avant. I can say it with daily reminders to myself and reading and studying and trying to be conscious of that voice in my head that America gave me growing up a white boy in this country, a straight white boy, no less, at a private school in Atlanta. Okay. There's a lot of voices in my head that tell me I'm right, you know, even now. So that I'll stop. But that, to me, I come up against often when I start talking about racism. I realize people I'm talking with think I'm talking about being nicer to people who don't look like them, which again is good. And we have to do that. Yes. But I'm talking about what Faith was talking about.
I so appreciate that. I just recently, I'll use this as a one comment. I'm putting my definition, the definition I use for racism, in the chat. But a friend of mine asked me to read the chapter of a book they're writing. And they asked in researching this chapter, so they wrote it. This was about gender. And they asked ChatGPT something about how do dads handle something to do with childcare. And ChatGPT answered, this isn't a task that is primarily for dads. And I thought it was interesting because similarly in this conversation about Palestine and Israel, somebody asked ChatGPT a question about, you know, Palestine, and got the answer, a politically correct answer that said the situation is complex. It's hard to figure out. There are many complex underlying issues. But when they asked the same question about Israel, the answer that came back was Israel, like all other countries, Israel is, you know, deserve, you know, freedom and the opportunity to blah, 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 right? So part of the thing, and this is just a computer, but it's a computer that's programmed by humans with our human thoughts and our human way of being, right? And so understanding that in our narratives, these biases exist and we don't even recognize them, because it's like I was told as a young Caribbean girl, be careful, dogs, they will bite you. And I grew up afraid of dogs. And my white friend said to me in college, she said it was the same thing for me. I was told, be careful, right? And so this work of becoming massively aware of the systems that cause us to say these things, Elvia, that you were saying, I think is the work, you know, and it's not this is not a single training, it's lifetime work. So I appreciate that example.
Yeah. The only thing I would briefly add to that, and thank you, Faith, but I've even used that slide before of, like, you know, looter versus, like, you know, someone scavenging to survive. And I don't think that, like, the person who said looter is a bad person. I think good and bad oversimplify the impressions that this larger system has made on us. And so what I love in the work with Dr. Avant is we spend time really digging at the root of that, really spending time in dialogue and community around those conversations, because good and bad does a disservice to the work. It makes it too easy to say, oh, well, that's those people over there who were raised by these kind of people, and that's not me. I'm a good person. And I think that does the entire field a disservice. Everyone benefits from engaging in these conversations, even good people like myself, you know. And so I'm excited. I'm excited when we get new clients, because I'm excited to dig in and create that community with them. And Dr. Avant, were you going to say something?
No, no, no. I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. Everything that you all said. I mean, we have all casually absorbed messages from, media, from our family, from our teachers, from our peers when we were in school, and it's just from our religious institutions. And so there are things that we know that we're aware of, and there are a lot of things that we're not aware of because it's not just what we see, but it's also what we don't see. And so just being very, very mindful of that. I remember we were watching a show and it was all, white men as doctors, and I hit pause, and my daughter was probably 8 or 9 at the time, and I was like, what is this message telling you about doctors? And she said that they're all white and that they're all men. And so my job as a mom is like, I can't dismantle all of these messages that she's receiving. I can't stop her from absorbing these messages, but what I can is plant little seeds in her mind to be paying attention of what she is seeing and witnessing, the messages that she is hearing, and asking her to really interrogate those messages. And then that's the same thing I can say for people in the workplace. Part of the work that we're doing is planting seeds. We want to build faith really works to build restorative workplaces. Like often someone said at a meeting a couple weeks ago that they come to work. We're building a structure to elevate conflict. And she said that I come to work and I'm drained and I go home and that's where I'm restored. And I'm like, woo, what if we can, expand that where we don't go to work to be depleted and then we go home to be repleted, but what if we go to work to be restored, right? And I think that that is part of anti-oppressive work, to just break up this idea that we have to produce in order to be valuable, in order to be worthy, in order to access transportation and housing and all of these other things. But what if we can go to work and do the work, but it's not just about productivity, but it's about the human emotions. It's about our engagement with one another. And so if you want to connect with us, please feel free to use this QR code that's on your screen. It will allow you to schedule a connection call with us. If you want to meet with us for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or even an hour, you're able to do that. If you want to support our work, you're able to do that. If you want to subscribe to our mailing list, if you know someone who might benefit from the work that we do, there's a form, a Google form where you can share some referrals. So if you have any questions for me, please let me know.
I really, 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 really appreciate this. And I will make sure that lots of people see this, because I can think of some folks right now that I know will be interested. This is so great. And it's also, side note, and I know we talked about this months ago or whatever, but it's really cool to see how much you all have grown just in like what seems to me like a very short amount of time. So kudos, well deserved.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you all so very much for this. This has been very eye-opening.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Good
Thank
to
you
hear.
all. Yes.
All right, y'all. Happy election day. Have a great one.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.